Hello, hello, hello. So today we are talking about Hedy Lamarr. She was one of the gorgeous beauties from old Hollywood who was mostly known just for that reason. Some people questioned her acting ability, but never did they doubt how drop dead gorgeous she was. She was the kind of woman who would write her unlisted phone number on a car window for a gentleman caller. But she wasn't all beauty. She had brains as well. She even, with the help of a music composer, designed a system to direct underwater missiles using a method of wireless communication. But for this episode, we are talking about Miss Hedy Lamarr's messy love life. But before I get into that, let me give you a few of her acting credits. Some of her notable films are Ecstasy from 1933, Ziegfeld Girl from 1941, and The Conspirators from 1944. She also received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1960, as well as the National Inventors Hall of Fame. She was an inductee in 2014 for frequency hopping spread spectrum technology. On November 9th of 2015, Google honored her on the 101st anniversary of her birth with a doodle, just barely capturing her beauty. While she is a little light on awards, she left an indelible mark on Hollywood. Hello, my name is Tamika, and whether you stumbled upon Junkie for a Story or are here by intention, thank you for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, please give it a like and subscribe. And don't forget to click the bell to turn on notifications. That way you won't miss out whenever I release new videos. There will be a link in the description for the biography I referenced in this episode, Beautiful, The Life of Hedy Lamarr by Stephen Michael Shearer. If you want more info about the book, you know what to do. And now, on to the video. So, Miss Hedy Lamarr grew up the only child of Gertrude and Emil Kiesler. She was born on November 9th, 1914, and she spent most of her early years in Vienna, Austria. Now, when you read her biography, you can tell she grew up in a very loving environment. She was very much doted on by her parents, very privileged, and wanted for nothing. And then she grew up. So I'm not sure if I would say she grew up fast, but you get the impression she was quite attractive at a very young age. And she caught the attention of the opposite sex before she was mature enough to know how to handle the attention. So she progressed with her romantic life early. At the age of 12, she won a beauty contest in Vienna. She also began to associate invention with her father, who would take her out on long walks. He would also tell her interesting stories, and I think that is the origin of her creative side. When she was a teenager, she always aspired to be an actress. And the way her mother put it, I mean, you really couldn't get in her way. When she knew what she wanted, she was going to get it. So in 1933, at the age of 18, Lamarr took on a film role that was quite risque. The film was Ecstasy, and she played the neglected young wife of an indifferent older man. Now, the film was one of those scandals of the time because it showed Lamarr's face in the throes of orgasm, and as well as a close up of some brief nude scenes, which again, this is 1933, so that wasn't the norm back then. So it was quite a scandal for her. And then when she got to America, the American studios, they tried to keep that hush hush. It was considered overly sexual and received negative publicity in America. It was also banned in Germany. But enough about her early acting career. Let's get to the men, right? So Lamarr married her first husband, Fritz Mandel, in 1933. She was 19, and he had given her an 11-carat diamond and gold ring, which she loved to flaunt. Now, Fritz was a wealthy man, and he loved to spoil his wife with lavish gifts. And in the beginning, Hedy was content. They had a nice country home in Schwarzenberg. Dinners were served on plates of gold, allegedly stolen in recent rioting in Vienna and acquired by Mandel. Now, that's a quote from Beautiful. She had a large staff of people to tend to her needs. So she basically was a kept woman at the age of 19. I mean, who would complain, right? But then she started to grow bored. And Fritz was kind of wanting his bride to not pursue acting. But you know how Hedy is, okay? So that was not going to happen. So the relationship, the marriage was doomed from the beginning because she could not fulfill her personal aspirations. She was meant to be the trophy wife who would just be arm candy for her husband. He became very protective and possessive of Hedy. He didn't want her out of his sight. He never wanted her to be alone. He would have servants scrutinize her every move. And she would, take measures to just get some alone time. Nothing too serious at first, but she was like a rebellious teenager, just wanting to sneak out of the house just for a moment alone. I mean, that's how suffocating her marriage was starting to feel. And then she started planning her escape. During her marriage to Fritz, Hedy lost her father. So I'm quoting from Beautiful. It says, on Thursday, February 14th, 1935, he was found dead at home by his wife, Gertrude, devastated by personal financial losses and worried about the increasing fear of the Nazi menace in neighboring Germany. Emil suffered a massive heart attack while resting in Hedy's former bedroom. He was 58 years old. Hedy's mom telephoned her with the news. She said, he spoke of you with his last breath, how he loved you. Now, Hedy, she had a close relationship with both of her parents. And after the death of her father, she started divulging to her mom the troubles in her marriage and how she wanted to possibly seek a divorce or some kind of exit. But her mother, being a traditional person, didn't really agree with it. She wasn't quite on board with the D word. At this point in the marriage, Hedy began talking to not just her mom about the troubles in her marriage, but she also unleashed her worries onto her mentor at a social event. So the two of them were alone, and she was talking about her troubled marriage and how she wanted to return to acting. And he said to her, my dear, you never will. It's all talk. And as time went on, she slowly started to become aware of the dangers and threats closing in on her. Now I'm quoting here. It says in beautiful, for endless hours, Fritz and his cronies, builders, weapons developers, and buyers, would talk about military supremacy and armaments. So Fritz specialized in making shells and grenades. He manufactured military aircraft as well. At some point, she realized, Hedy, that her husband was making arms agreements with the Nazis. So now it was not just a troubled marriage, but she was in fear for her life at this point. But she also had a new lover, okay? So she had a mountain climber by the name of Count Max Hardegg. So the two, they would, go out socially, and she threw caution to the wind. She was no longer being discreet with her new lover. But Fritz did find out about the affair. And of course, he forbid his wife to visit the theater, which is a place they were known to frequent, Hedy and her lover. And he even ordered her not to leave the house. And of course, she was surrounded by servants, so she couldn't leave. Because obviously they had to tell Fritz if she did, or they would lose their job. So, yeah, she became trapped in her own home. Then one day, her mom was visiting. When she saw her daughter packing her belongings, all her personal items, her jewelry, everything, planning to leave her husband. So one day, Fritz departed for a hunting trip, and Hedy thought she would make her move then. Hedy, dressed as a servant and with suitcases and passport in hand, quietly slipped out of the apartment. She had to wait an hour in what must have been crushing fear for the arrival of the Trans-Europe Express to Paris. It says she sat rigidly in her compartment until the train departed the station. And of course, she had some friends, help her plan her escape. So the express crossed the Czechoslovakia border, then continued into Germany, and finally it reached the border of France, eventually pulling into Paris. That was the plan, actually, but waiting for her was a cable from her devoted maid, Laura, telling her that Manda was on his way to bring her home. So Hedy swiftly, without even unpacking her clothes, caught a cab and within half an hour was on the train to Calais to catch a Channel vessel to England, where she arrived safely in London and checked into the Hotel Regent Palace in the center of Piccadilly Circus. And it says her husband did not pursue her across the English Channel. And so I'm quoting here. It says, on September 18, 1937, the New York Daily News announced from Vienna that Hedy and Fritz had filed for a mutual divorce action. So at that point, I guess he knew his wife was unhappy. She was having affairs. She was sleeping around with his best friend. And he just grew tired of it all and said, you know what? She managed to get away. I'll let her be. And obviously he had more pressing concerns. So that was the first marriage she escaped. And we don't have time to get into all the messiness with that marriage, but Hedy used her beauty strategically to try to escape her marriage and Vienna. There were a number of men in her husband's close circle that she engaged in romantic affairs with as a way to create a path to escape the marriage. But because the men had close ties with her husband and they basically were on his payroll, it never worked out. From there, Hedy immediately linked up with the Hollywood producer, Louis B. Mayer. And he said he offered her a film contract. He said if she could pay her own way to Hollywood, he would offer her a 6-month standard studio contract at $125 a week. Now, she was at this point already an established actress in Europe, but not well known in Hollywood, obviously. Nonetheless, his offer offended Hedy Lamarr, who went through a name change right around that time. So she was no longer going by Hedy Kiesler, and instead she took on the last name Lamarr. Now, it's contentious where the name came from, but it's said that the last name Lamarr came from another actress who died of tuberculosis and an alleged drug addiction. But Hedy denies that claim, saying that it came from the French words for the sea, which are Lemire, I guess, or however you pronounce it. But that's where she's claiming the last name came from. Either way, she started going by Lamarr, and on September 30th, she reached New York. She was on U.S. soil. So from there, she immediately went back to work. Her ex-husband, Mandel, well, first I should say the divorce was granted, but it's unknown which country finalized the divorce. Either way, they were considered divorced. And Mandel's expatriate affairs were publicized in American papers often. But Louis B. Mayer took measures to silence the connection between Fritz and his new megastar, Hedy Lamarr. The famed producer didn't want any scandals associated with his leading lady. Shortly after, she began a serious relationship with another actor, Reginald Hopper, and they were living together. After she became a contracted player by MGM, she was still living with Reginald Hopper. And by the 1930s, the mid 1930s, she became one of the biggest named actresses in American cinema. Then one night, Hedy Lamarr met Gene Markey. The two went to a bar or something. 4 weeks later, they were married. And now you'll see as we progress into her dating history that Hedy Lamarr has a propensity to engage in affairs with married men, or either she's married at the time, but infidelitous affairs rub her the right way, apparently. So, anyway, she meets Gene Markey one night. Then the two meet up again at a bar or something like that 4 weeks later, and they are married. Now, remember, she was living with Reginald Hopper. So Hopper actually found out that Lamarr got married through the papers. And that's when he learned that his girlfriend, his live-in girlfriend, was another man's wife. Now, Markey, he did his best to kind of smooth things over with Hopper to no avail, but he tried to convince Hopper that it was merely an accident. He meant to let him know that, they were getting married. I think Lamarr and Markey agreed to tell their partners because they each had relationships. And so Markey told his partner, and he left that up to Lamarr to tell Hopper. But yeah, Hedy didn't keep her end of that deal. So Markey was trying to smooth things over, but Hopper just wasn't buying it, okay? Anyway, the married couple were happy in the beginning, as with all of Hedy Lamarr's marriages. Then Hedy tried to get pregnant, and apparently it was taking a little too long. So she adopted a 7-month-old baby boy. Now, remember what I said about how Hedy Lamarr gets what she wants? So I don't know how often or for how long they were trying to have a baby, but that's what happened. She tried to conceive naturally and it wasn't working. And so she just went on and adopted. Mission accomplished. However, Markey did not feel the natural parental obligation to the adopted baby and always maintained a strong interest in the upbringing of his biological daughter from a previous relationship. The marriage eventually began to stall, in part to their acting careers and Hedy's blighted personality. On July 6, 1940, Hedy consulted a lawyer about her failing marriage. The next day, it was announced, and Hedy confirmed it, that the couple separated and Gene had moved out of the marital home and was staying with his father. Hedy petitioned for a divorce from Gene on Wednesday, September 4th, citing cruelty, which was the norm in those days, or at least that's how it appeared when it came to prominent or wealthy figures. They reached a settlement in regards to the property on September 13th. Gene acknowledged the divorce decree, but did not answer the claim of cruelty. The final decree came on October 3rd, 1940. Hedy admitted that in their 16-month marriage, they only spent 4 nights together. I would say that's sufficient time to, the math makes sense when it comes to the dissolution of that marriage. I think 4 days is just enough. She also said she realized over time that Markey was married to his work and he had lost his parents in that short time that they were married. He also had a battle with pneumonia. So they endured some heavy trials during that barely 2-year marriage. I mean, it's like a year and a half that they were married. But it sounds like they went through a lot in that short period of time that just they didn't have the solid foundation to overcome those trials. But at this point, Hedy was getting in the habit of ending her marriages and relationships in a certain kind of way. Now, she said herself, our home life was so constantly interrupted with my work and his outside happenings that the first thing we knew, it was all over. Then she was reintroduced to John Loder, a 6'3" handsome Englishman and actor, on Christmas evening at the Canteen in Hollywood. They married, but the marital bliss was short-lived. They were always having private arguments, and Hedy would express feelings of resentment at his reserved nature. She wanted him to be more aggressive and assertive. Then one day, her son Jamie was involved in a minor accident. He was taken to the hospital and treated. He walked away with a scar on his face that would remain in his adult years. Hedy blamed John for letting the boy go out. On January 18th, Hedy announced to the press that she and her husband were separating. On March 18th, the couple reconciled. And then they had a baby girl together. Maybe that contributed to Lamarr's decision to give the marriage another go. Of course, having a new baby and not being married to the father was not a good look in Hollywood. I mean, unacceptable, okay? But Hedy still kept busy with her acting career, and at this time, she started a film production company as well. And she started to produce her own movies, which she starred in. They tended to go over budget and caused her a great deal of distress. She eventually left MGM. Then John's acting career began to slow down, and he essentially was known as Mr. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy gave birth to their second child, a baby boy. When she told John about the second pregnancy, she said, I'm quoting, "I am pregnant and I want a divorce." To which John said, "Well, you hit the jackpot, didn't you?" These two know how to do foreplay, don't they? So John, knowing his wife of 3 years, remained submissive till the very end. He granted her the divorce on her terms. She received full custody of their 3 children, and he paid child support. She then married a nightclub owner, restaurateur, and former band leader, Ernest Ted Stauffer, in 1951. So she was vacationing in Acapulco when she met Teddy. She was with her children, and at this time she was growing tired of Hollywood and looking to settle down. So it appears she found him at the right time. Now, Stauffer was born in Switzerland on May 2nd, 1909. After schooling, he became a band leader. By the next year, his band, the original Teddies, had their first engagement at the Cafe Chapel in 1929. By the next year, the original Teddies were playing around Berlin. Their greatest popularity came while playing gigs during the 1936 Olympic Games and later at the famous Delphi Dance Hall in Berlin. By 1937, the original Teddy's recording of Goody Goody had sold over 700,000 copies. And I'm quoting from the biography Beautiful. All right, so Teddy had some meteoric success as a band leader, and then he went into the restaurant business, where he became quite successful. It says he opened the Casanova Club in 1942. That was when he arrived in Mexico City. Upon arriving in Mexico City, Teddy opened the Casanova Club in 1942. He eventually landed in Acapulco in 1943 and opened Casablanca Club. And he had other clubs that he managed, not clubs, but hotels that he managed as well. His first wife was actress Faith Demergue, and they had been divorced for almost 4 years at the time that he met Hedy. And so when they met, it was like all of her affairs, quite passionate, quite sexual, and the two were very much captivated by one another. But Teddy did have a jealous streak. Based on her usual MO, Hedy moved quickly with this relationship, as she did with the others. The good news is he was a divorced man, so that was a much needed change optics-wise for Hedy. So they married on June 11th in West Los Angeles. And at this time, Hedy decided to sell off all her expensive garments and jewelry and furs, everything. She had an auction, and she was planning to be done with Hollywood and move to Acapulco to be a wife and mother. That was the plan. So it says on June 18th, it was announced in the Los Angeles Times that the American art galleries Louis E. Wass and Arthur B. Good auctioneers in Beverly Hills were auctioning off $1 million worth of furnishings and personal effects belonging to Hedy Lamarr. Some of the items included various paintings, $250,000 worth of jewelry, 480 dresses and gowns, furs, lingerie, and over 75 pairs of shoes. Also listed among the items were 4 wedding rings. We should all be so lucky, right? So Hedy declared she was through with Hollywood and emptied out her Hollywood life. The move to Acapulco was desperately rash and ill-conceived. The kids had an awfully difficult time adjusting to their new school, which was filthy and nothing like their affluent customs in America. As far as the marriage, there were highs and lows with lavish gifts to make up for the lows and get back to the highs. But Hedy, as she often does, grew tired of the roller coaster marriage, and after 7 months, she returned to Hollywood. And of course, she was seeking a divorce from Teddy in the immediate future. Hedy said, I bundled up the kids and my things and got out of that sickening paradise. Once again, Hedy claimed mental and physical suffering as reason for petitioning for a divorce. She quickly returned to using her professional name and secured screen roles. Yeah, so that didn't work out. I do find it odd that she just decided to up and leave Hollywood for a man, but was like selling off all her things. I mean, that was a bit. Mm, that was a move. We'll say that was a move. But I mean, as I was reading it, I thought this is not going to end well. And sure enough, not even a whole year later, just 7 months, she finds herself returning to Hollywood. I just thought that was kind of odd the way she was burning bridges like that and just wanting to sever ties with Hollywood. I mean, you always want to have a backup plan, and her not being a young girl, I mean, you would think she would be smarter than that. But nonetheless, she learned her lesson and she went on back to Hollywood. Fortunately, they were willing to take her back in. All right, on to the next one, which brings us to W. Howard Lee, the Texas oil millionaire. So at this time, Miss Hedy Lamarr was looking for someone to finance one of her film projects. She was the producer and she needed some financial backing. And that brings us to W. Howard Lee. So first he called her up and asked her to have dinner with him at his hotel. She declined, but he was quite persistent and he pursued her until she agreed to a meeting. Within days, she acquired the financial backing for the film and announced her upcoming nuptials to Lee. On Tuesday, December 22nd, Hedy and Lee married in a brief double ring ceremony in the Queens County Courthouse in Long Island City. W. Howard Lee had one daughter from a former marriage, and of course, Lamarr had her 3 children. Her new husband quickly picked up her expensive tabs because Miss Lamarr has been living quite the kept woman life, okay? Husband or not, she is accustomed to the finer things in life. So, yeah. He picked up the tab and ultimately put her on a $1,000 a month allowance. Lamarr returned to acting for self-gratification and out of boredom because she did move to Texas with the millionaire and her kids came with her. But, as always, she grew bored. So while the kids were away at camp or school or whatever, she needed to fulfill that time some kind of way. She once told a reporter, I feel sure that Howard and I will never divorce. The presumptions of a beautiful and kept woman. Hedy's final film opened to bland reviews on January 22nd, 1958. Now, she was never a Joan Crawford or Bette Davis. She didn't have that caliber of acting. Still, the comfort of wealth Lee provided caused her no concern. However, after the reviews and reception of her film, The Female Animal, she was forgotten from the public's mind. And what do you know? She's separated from her millionaire husband without a successful career to fall back on. And she did this in her middle age. How brave. On August 8th, she announced her separation from Howard Lee. She moved back to California with her kids and abruptly cut ties with the friends she made in Texas. Now, I must say, at this point, Hedy Lamarr was creating a second profession with her divorcing skills. Okay, it was becoming like a contract job in itself. And she was quite accustomed to having her way in the divorce. However, this one, was giving her a little bit of pushback. Okay, so Lamarr was sure Lee would grant her a divorce on her terms. But when he challenged her demands for support, she knew she was in for a battle. Now, what surprised me is that Hedy said of her fifth husband, he was the only man I ever really loved. I loved Houston, but it was a miserable mistake. I made many friends in Houston. I tried so hard, but they wouldn't accept me. So I don't know if it was just her being too glamorous of a woman to settle down in Houston, but whatever the case, she wasn't happy. She returned to Hollywood and she wanted some financial support while she found another husband. I mean, she still had her looks, but she wasn't working as far as acting. She wasn't doing much in those days. So, of course, she was expecting her millionaire husband to grant her financial support. I mean, it wouldn't take much, right? She's not going to leave him penniless, so she just thought it was perfectly reasonable until he said, Hmm. So the two of them went back and forth, back and forth. She said he was behind on monthly separation payments, which amounted to $9,000. Lee countersued Hedy for divorce, alleging that the couple's extremely large living expenses prevented them from accumulating a community estate. Lee also asked that all separate property owned by him before the marriage be awarded to him, and that the courts determine what equity Miss Lamarr may have in other holdings. Yeah, so he was playing hardball, okay? Hedy once said, after a taste of stardom, everything else is poverty. And I take it after the strain that the separation was putting on her, in 1957, Hedy returned to acting. After a lot of back and forth, on April 22nd, Hedy was awarded a settlement of approximately $500,000 in Howard's uncontested divorce from her. The news was brought to Hedy at her Beverly Hills home. In the settlement, she was to receive interest in some of Howard's oil well investments, which would bring her steady income of about $3,600. She would receive $73,000 in cash to clean up her debts and $50,000 in negotiable notes. She was also allowed to keep her furs, jewelry, and furniture then in her possession. From that settlement, she was required to pay $50,000 to her two attorneys and another bill of $25,000. So she really didn't walk away with much. She then married her divorce lawyer, and they stayed married for 2 years. After her sixth divorce from Louis J. Bowles in 1965, Hedy Lamarr never remarried, and she spent the last 35 of her years unmarried. There was some evidence years later that Hedy Lamarr's adopted son was not so adopted. So throughout her life, she claimed her first son was not her biological son, and that she adopted him during her marriage to Jean Markey. However, years later, her son found documentation that he was born out of wedlock and the son of actor John Loder with Hedy Lamarr. John Loder, who she later married as her third husband. So, yeah, the pressures of being a woman in the 1940s. Mm-mm-mm. Well, that does it for Miss Hedy Lamarr. She was quite an interesting character. I mean, I think she was very intelligent, but also she was smart in unexpected ways. She was very well read, but also I think with her relationship with her father and her first husband, she had certain interests that the average woman didn't have in those days. And she had knowledge that they didn't have in those days through those relationships she had with her father and first husband. So, yeah, she was more than just a beautiful face, more than just looks. Although people go on and on and on about her looks. I must say I didn't get it, but I guess you had to be there. I don't know. Anyway, thank you for watching and listening. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you choose. You can find a link in the description for her biography, Beautiful, The Life of Hedy Lamarr by Stephen Michael Shearer. Now, I personally have always had a fondness for old Hollywood and the movies and the stars and the fashion of that time. But I would really love to see her story told in like maybe a TV movie, I think. I only say that because she's not, I don't know how to say it. I don't know if I should say, she's not, her legacy hasn't crossed into other generations, I don't think. I think it kind of stopped pre 2000s. I mean, I don't think people today really know Hedy Lamarr. And if they do, not well. And then her filmography is not that impressive. So I don't think, her name has a lot of clout. It doesn't hold a lot of weight to make people want to go to like the theaters to see her. But I could see watching it at home, a Lifetime movie or something like that. I mean, she still is such an interesting character. So I would love to see a biopic. But, I'm one of, 10 people. So it may never come to fruition, but that's okay. All right. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.